Coming up on today's episode of the Salesman Podcast.
The first area is well-being, and that includes physical, emotional, and spiritual health. So what are the key takeaways on that? Rest is huge. Nutrition is huge. Those little tiny recharge activities, getting into nature, meditation, mindfulness.
Hello, Sales Nation. I'm Will Barron, host of the Salesman Podcast, the world's most listened to B2B sales show. If you haven't already, make sure to click subscribe. And with that, let's meet today's guest.
I'm Beth Kennedy, and I'm a leadership coach and also author of Career Recharge, 5 Strategies to Boost Resilience and Beat Burnout. And my mission is just to help professionals really be the best they can be, but also be super resilient so that they have the energy and the life they want.
On this episode of the show with Beth, we're diving into how we can boost our levels of resilience within the marketplace as sales professionals, how we can eliminate the chances of burnout. We get into personality testing, which is absolutely fascinating, personal branding, and a whole lot more. So with that, let's jump right in. So to set us up and to add some context here, and to put a positive spin on the kind of resilience side of things, is this a skill that is a competitive advantage in the marketplace? Is this something that if you get good at it in sales, you can just beat the competition by being more resilient and lasting longer than them when you're competing over the competition?
Yes. And I think what's important is I want to just take a second to explain what I feel resiliency is. So you often think about resiliency as just bouncing back. So give it to me again and work harder and tougher. But resiliency to me, career resilience, is actually moving forward. So it's dealing with those challenges, but being able to say, I have the toolkit so I can move forward. And I've had my coaching business for over 25 years. And the individuals that have the resiliency toolbox, not only do they handle the challenges, but they also hit their numbers and they also have very high career satisfaction.
And is this, I don't know how you may have a better idea to put this into a diagram, but would we have resilience on one end of it, then on a sliding scale have kind of career burnout on the other?
Yes. So the piece about burnout that a lot of people don't realize is they think of burnout as just someone that's like being admitted into the hospital. And it's really important to realize this is a burnout. So we want to catch it. We want to catch burnout before you become, this point where you're just not productive. That's where resiliency helps, because what I work on with my clients is what I call the Benari resiliency model. And there's 5 areas. And basically the goal is to realize we're all involved in fight and flight mode all the time. We're always going to have stressors. So whether it's work stress, family stress, the world stress. So it's having this toolbox. So instead of always being in fight and flight mode, is making our brain, actually, it's called the depleted brain issue. We're producing so much cortisol, which is that hormone that makes us all exhausted. It gives us a fuzzy brain. When we have a toolkit for resiliency, we get some of those really good brain hormones like cortisol and oxytocin and serotonin. Then we're energized, and then we can really have the kind of career and the life we want.
So is the goal then? Clearly, this is. I'm gonna throw you a ridiculous question here, but it'll set up the rest of the conversation. So, is the goal here to never be in the fight or flight? I don't remember. I always forget whether this is parasympathetic or sympathetic part of our nervous system. Is the goal to never be there and always be chilled and always be meditating and sitting on a rock in a field somewhere, or is the answer perhaps to go between the two?
It's right, exactly. It's to go between the two, and I think that the challenge is, many people feel like that whole, I think unfortunately, mindfulness, sometimes people feel like, really, how is that going to make me make an impact? But the reality is we have to figure out what of these mindfulness pieces work for us. So I have a real issue with many stress management classes because I tell people you need to do A, B, C, D, and E. And the reality is we have to figure out what are our stressors and what are the strategies that work for us. So I might meditate 10 minutes a day, but a lot of the individuals, I work with a lot of sales folks, they meditate 2 minutes a day, and that works for them.
So we're big fans of meditation. I always recommend the Headspace app. So I'll ask you your thoughts on this in a second on the practical side of things. But is a good way to look at this the fact that a whole lot of billionaires meditate? The CEO of Amazon, one of the fastest growing companies on the planet, meditates. And so if he can spend 10, 20 minutes out of his schedule a day where his company's probably turning over, $15 million a minute. There's probably some ridiculous number there that if he can afford to do it, then we can afford to do it. Is that a reasonable thing to kind of put in front of the audience here?
It is reasonable, but I think the unfortunate thing that happens is people take these classes and they feel like, oh, I have to start meditating for 15 minutes a day. So what I do, I actually have a full day training. It's called Career Recharge, where I introduce meditation and I say, you want to start really small. So Headspace is a great app, but the other two apps that I love, one is free. It's called Stop, Breathe, and Think. And that's 5 years ago, I began with that app. And it was perfect because it's, what I love about it is the first step on that app is it has you assess your emotions. And then it has you say, how are you feeling? And you put that in. And then it's incredible. It will actually customize and send you an app that will work for you for that day. So that was wonderful for me for about a year. And then I got bored. And then I went to the Calm app, calm.com app. So what I encourage people to do is to try it and figure out sometimes it's the voice. I have a lot of clients that say, Beth, I can't stand that voice. I had to go to. The other one that's very popular is Dan Harris's 10% Happier. Yep. That's another one so I think, again, even if it's 2 minutes, 6 times a week, you can get just as much benefits as these people that are meditating 20 minutes a day.
Sure. And you mentioned something then with one of the apps. Is there a way to measure our level of resilience? Because clearly if we can measure something and we know where our baseline is, perhaps we can be more in control more mindful of where we are at in the moment, but also perhaps we can look at increasing our resilience as well.
Yeah, that is actually a great question, the ROI on resilience. And one of the things I have to go by is experiential kind of results. So I usually coach clients for 6 months or to a year. So they start off doing a baseline for me. And then 6 months later, they do another like self-directed. But then I also do interviews. So I interview their colleagues and their boss in the beginning and their colleagues and their bosses at the end. But again, it's one of those things this is what I also say in my class. I wish I could say it's like our phones. We can tell our phone is charged to 100%. How can I prove the ROI on resilience? It's really something that I think you feel from your success. So I feel really grateful that, I have a very large coaching practice. I have a very large training and speaking business, and I have a lot of energy, and I credit it to really taking resiliency very serious. Many of my clients will say they have seen such a change in their energy and their focus as a result of working on my resiliency model. So it's very experiential, but I'm thrilled that, in my book, I have a lot of client stories, and they honestly have kept their names in the book because they wanted to share their success. So, I wish I could say it's like a chemistry example where we could say,
So we'll dive into the resiliency model in a second, but just on this, because it's something I'm focused on and thinking about at the moment. Have you come across heart rate variability kind of testing before?
Yeah, I haven't. And I think the studies are, they're fascinating. It's just like, I don't know if you're familiar with, we can also see the results now, the MRI scans as far as meditation goes. And the other interesting thing is they're showing how they can see the gray matter in the matter in the brain actually change. So I think that the science is there to support all these areas that I believe is so important for our resiliency.
And because the reason I asked this, I've just got it delivered, and they don't sponsor the show. This is just a personal plug. It's called the Oura Ring, OURA. I'm that bad at spelling. I can't visualize words in my mind as I go through it. The simplest words like that. So you just wear it. It's tiny, looks very similar to just a normal ring, but that measures your sleep. It can pull in data from your exercise activity, and it doesn't do things like monitor meditation or anything like that, which would be kind of add another level to all this. This is more for athletic performance and becoming more resilient in that realm. But each day it gives you a score basically and tells you yesterday your heart rate when you slept, because it does sleep tracking, was super high. And so it's likely, and going off your heart rate variability during the night as well, it's very likely you need a day to recover. So I was just interested to see if this kind of has trickled down from not that I'm an athlete, but from the world of athletics down into the business world, because I know that if I don't get enough sleep, it doesn't matter how resilient I am. It doesn't matter what I'm doing, or, I could take all kinds of smart drugs or whatever it is, and I'd still be a mess the next day. And get my sleep right had the ROI on that was just incredible in itself. So with that said, Beth, what else is in, or what is in the model, and what do we need to kind of prioritize day to day so that we can improve our own resiliency?
Right. So that's a kind of a perfect kind of place to hit off. So there's 5 areas. So I'll give you kind of like the big picture, and then we can dive into details if you want more details. So the first area is well-being, and that includes physical, emotional, and spiritual health. So what are the key takeaways on that? Rest is huge. Nutrition is huge. Those little tiny recharge activities, getting into nature, meditation, mindfulness. So again, it's that whole kind of health area. Then we go into the second area is self-awareness. And that's where really knowing what's your purpose, like why are we on this earth? The second part is, do you have a growth mindset? We're seeing all the research, and it doesn't mean being positive about everything. It means saying you're open to learning. And the third is personality type, being aware of our type and how we flex it. And that's really important for when we talk about making impact in our career and in our personal life. The third area is your personal brand. So what are your natural attributes? What are your strengths? What's the impact you are making in your department or in your business? And what's your reputation? Because it's so, I've seen a lot of people go out of business. They forget that we have to really be thinking about what's the impact? What's the reputation? So that's the third area. The fourth area is connection. And this is an area that I feel very, very passionate about, because I feel like with a lot of my business folks, I work with many workaholics that are so passionate like you about what they do. And I'll say to them, what's your connection plan? And they're like, what are you talking about? So this is the importance of nourishing personal and professional relationships and having a plan. So who are the people that champion you? Who are the people that support you in your career and inspire you and motivate you? But then also, who are the people you reach out to? Who are the people you mentor? Because we know give and take is so important for connection. And then the final one is innovation. And I don't mean innovation just like the buzzword like Apple, or I mean innovation as far as what are the personal and professional challenges you're taking, and being aware that risk and failure is part of developing resiliency. So as far as innovation goes, people love my personal innovation examples. What's the awesome vacation you're going to take this year? What's the awesome new thing you're going to learn? I personally, 25 years ago, got involved in career coaching organizations and budget that every year. So in 2 weeks, I'll be leaving for San Diego for my, it's called the Career Thought Leader Conference. And it's something that I just feel is so important. Whatever profession you're in, what are you doing to invest in you? But also, what are you doing to invest in your fund and to make sure you're budgeting both to help you be productive? So those are the 5 areas from the big picture.
There's about 25 things I want to run through here, Beth. So there might be a part 2 to this episode in the future.
Okay.
And it's interesting because there's a lot of inadvertent, but clearly we're in similar bubbles here, kind of thing of what I'm trying to do. My podcast is clearly what you're doing with your consulting and the coaching and all that side of things and the speaking. So we're kind of I don't know why I'm coming up with these terrible analogies today, 2 sides of the same coin. But with that said, a few things that struck out to me. One, personality type. So I want to just touch on this for a second. How important is it for the audience to know what the personality type is, and then how that perhaps interacts with other people, and how game-changing can that be?
Okay, so this is unbelievable. So 30 years ago, I worked at UMass Boston, and I was so fortunate. I was one of these people, I always wanted to get more development. So I asked my boss, could I go to California to get trained in the Myers-Briggs type indicator? So he agreed. I got certified. I have used that tool personally and professionally nonstop. And not only do I do it one-on-one with clients, but I have a training class, and I will tell you, I just taught it last week. After the class is over, I would say at least 50% of the participants come up to me and say, Beth, could I have the link for my partner? Yep. Could I have the link? And others will say, I wish I had this 10 years ago. I wish I had this 15 years ago. I even had a gentleman say to me, this would have saved my marriage. So it is actually crucial. And I will be honest with you, there's lots of them out there. What color are you? There's the disc there. They're all fabulous. It's the importance of having that self-awareness where, me being an extrovert, I work with 80% of my clients are introverts. Mm-hmm. So it's so important for me to be focused on them and not just filling in all their sentences. And then my introverted clients, they have really big jobs. They're not going to get that next promotion unless they learn to flex a little bit and speak out at meetings. So we could spend a whole session just on personality types.
So, because one is fascinating, but then the other reason is with the sales school, our product, which we're building kind of version 2 of at the moment, the first thing you do as you go in, there is a personality type. And it's not Myers-Briggs, and I'm not going to say it is similar to Myers-Briggs, so I don't want to get sued, but it's similar to Myers-Briggs, right? So I did the content around, I'm working with a psychologist that we've hired to consult with us as well on this, to kind of add to go in details what we possibly can and make it super applicable to sales professionals. And one of the things that I uncovered from writing the content with help of the psychologist on the back of it was that there's seemingly a bunch of different personality types that if you have that personality type, sales might be genuinely an uphill struggle for you. And sales is one of those roles where you typically fall into it. Very few people, and myself excluded, I can tell the tale of this if we've got time later on, but very few people go when they're 7, I either want to be an astronaut, a fireman, or a salesperson selling SaaS accounting software or whatever it is. And rightly or wrongly, it's a career that both people fall into as opposed to something that they aim for from a young age. So with kind of a long-winded question here, Beth, for anyone who finds themselves with a personality type where the data comes out and says, perhaps this isn't the role that you're more likely to have success in another role versus this role, how fixed are the results of Myers-Briggs or any personality type? Okay. Is this something that we can leverage and change, or is this something that is set in stone and we should change career and change kind of our future plans on?
Okay, so this is a great question, and this comes up a lot. So the first thing, which is really important, is every type can do any career, but we're going to have more or less stress depending on our natural preferences. So you nailed it perfectly. So there are some types that get into sales, and I've coached many of these individuals that they're like, Beth, it feels like oil and vinegar. Like I'm not like the rest of these people. So I have taught them how to flex their preferences. So yes, you can stretch, you can flex, you can learn strategies. But the part at the end of the day that we all have to realize is we are, according to Jung, who this goes back to believe it or not, the 1940s. He honestly believes we're hardwired one way. And a lot of his predecessors felt like it's very hard to change. But so I have to kind of challenge them a little bit, even though they're not around anymore. What I have learned over the years is if I have someone very determined that there is a career they really want to do, they can learn to enhance that preference. But this is where the resiliency is huge, because even if, let me just say, it's a sales role where you have to be extroverted 85% of the time and you're an introvert, the piece that you really want to focus on your resiliency is for you, your recharge is going to be, you really need that time alone. You really need that time, whether it could be a martial arts that you might want to do. It could be that you need to sometimes you need to have time out in nature. But that's where, resiliency is another way I would think of resiliency is what's the personal recharge you need to be at your best. So, for example, some of these sales individuals that I've coached, they are on what I call the burnout escalator. They are going down quicker and quicker and quicker, and they need to press stop. And then they need to build in strategies daily. Because, the week in the Caribbean, that's nice, but
sounds nice to me.
Yeah. You need more than that. You need daily recharge. And that's the part about personality type. The reason why I became so passionate about it is it's not like one of these tools where it says, this is who you are. Sorry. No, you can, if you want to, you can be proactive and you can, what I call it is flexing. You can learn to flex. For example, I'm an N in the Myers-Briggs, which means big picture, visionary. I love to design training, very creative, but to run a business for 25 years ago, I have to do my taxes. So I've learned, I hate it, but I've learned to work on my S part. And I have little strategies, I have little cues, and that's helped me. And with my clients, I have a lot of S clients. They like details, they want. So you definitely can develop both preferences.
Love it. And I will double down on this in that when I was a kid, I was extremely introverted in that I didn't want to hang out. No, maybe I did. I had friends. I wasn't kind of, and I played in a band. I played on stage, But I didn't want to be the front man or woman. It was always a kind of a dude in all the bands. But I wanted to be the back, play drums. Playing basketball, I always wanted to play kind of team sports, but with a small team as opposed to a football team and a bunch of like rowdy lads or again women kind of going drinking afterwards. That kind of didn't appeal to me. And it's only when I got into kind of 22, 23, 24 when I first started in the medical device sales roles that then I kind of had to I got jumped in the deep end and just had to force myself to become more extroverted. And it's interesting because now I start to understand some of this or maybe I don't understand it. I can test some of the personality side of things of myself and the people around me. I know now that the friction that I had with my sales manager at my last job, it wasn't anything to do with the fact that we hated each other. We had clearly different personality types. I don't think we understood how to communicate with each other from numerous levels. We don't need to go into that, but that was a point of contention. Now with my my partner, it happens every night. She's more introverted than what I am. And she'll go, you going to bed? Because I want to watch TV on my own for an hour before I go to bed. And I'll go to bed early so that she can she's a doctor, so she's got things to think about and like actual things to decompress on, as opposed to me who thinks I'm busy and stressed, but I'm not really. I'm just sat here chatting to people like yourself. So she will literally demand to kick me out of the room, and I'll either go read or go to bed kind of half an hour earlier than what she does. And we work really well together because we understand that we need that kind of bit of time alone. And I probably would do her head in if I was constantly hanging out with her and winding her up and being high energy when she needed that kind of moment to chill out. So where I'm going out of all of this is how important then is it not just to understand ourselves, but to be able to make, even if it's just a glancing view of the people around us, and how much more effective does our communication get when we can say, well, that person is this type or that type or that type, and I've got a good gist of how to communicate with them.
Right. That piece is huge. So it's funny that you said about your partner being a doctor. I work a lot of in Boston and Cambridge, Massachusetts. I work with a lot of doctors and I work with a lot of cancer scientists, and a lot of them are eyes. Again, so passionate, hardworking. And when they learn this, they also need a lot of that. A lot of them need that individual recharge. Even I've actually had a woman yesterday I had to teach during the day. She's at meetings, a lot of meetings. And I told her, one of the things I tell people to think about is during your workday, how are you presenting yourself? Are you looking focused or frazzled? And I had to share with her that when during our coaching session, because we were face to face, I said, you're looking very frazzled to me. And she's an I who's been back to back to back to meetings. And I said to her, one of the little strategies you need to learn is, like, even when you're walking from meeting to meeting, great time to just do some nice deep breathing. At lunchtime, get out of the building, because eyes really, so even during the day, but the other question, which is fabulous, is knowing the people you're working with. So I work in a lot of progressive companies, and what I do is we do the personality type for the entire team. And then everyone knows, oh, no wonder why John and Mary are constantly conflicting. So for those of you that are familiar with personality type, the last letter in the Myers-Briggs is whether you're more a J or judger or more a perceiver. And what happens in the world of work is there's a lot of conflict among that. But once I teach it, you see the light bulbs go off in the class, because all of a sudden, again, the manager or the colleagues thought they couldn't stand each other. But it's not that they couldn't stand each other. It was that personality preference. The J gets things done almost instantly. The P gets it done, but at the last minute. So the two think they're doing it against each other, and it's just our natural style.
Yeah, and I'm last minute to every project I've ever done in the whole of my life, whether it was GCSE exams or whether it's launching the sales school. We're already kind of massively behind, but we're going to be fine on that front. And it's kind of me that holds it all together when everyone else is stressing out. So I appreciate that. And the reason I kind of double down into that, even though you give us kind of another 25 points to run through here, which we'll touch on in a second, Beth, is that sales is just such a beast of an industry that if you're, perhaps you're slightly introverted, you need that little bit of time between phone calls to have a second and then you can jump back in. Well, if you're working in an office as a SDR, sales development rep, and your quota is 500 phone calls a day, not 50 good conversations or 10 kind of follow-up calls or whatever would be more appropriate to move the sales forward. If your quota is just number of calls, clearly you're not going to have as good a success likely versus a role where perhaps you only need to make 2 or 3 calls, but you're managing an account as opposed to kind of just trying to drum up new business by just masses of phone calls, versus an extrovert might absolutely love that, just getting on the phone with random people and going back and forth. So I'm not saying that if your personality type isn't suited to one thing in the sales space, it might not be suited to another. But I know when I align what I'm doing with what my personality type is, or even what I want it to be, perhaps I want to be slightly more extroverted or introverted at certain occasions, I'll try and consciously kind of conjure up where I want to be with everything and move towards that. So with all that said, Beth, something that we kind of touched on just before we click record, and something that I am not very good at, is both celebrating success and having a minute to take the gas off the pedal and just go, wow, we've done X, Y, Z, that's awesome. And taking holidays and breaks. How does this affect our resilience over perhaps not just the month, but over the weeks and decades as we are, trying to level up our careers?
Yeah. So great point. So one of the things, again, is I want you to think about, stress like a rubber band. So we go through our day and we have stressor and we have stressor and we have stressor and we have stressor. So what happens is, again, it's that flight or fight mode. Our amygdala in our brain is being hijacked. And we think, oh, I can keep going. And again, we're going down that burnout escalator. So what we need to do is we need to realize we need to have regular recharge strategies. So let's say, for example, going on holiday. I can't tell you how many clients I coach, they get 5 weeks vacation. They're lucky if they use one. So the piece that we need to figure out is not only how do we spend our vacation time, but how do we get recharge on the weekends? So I actually have in my book that make Sunday fun day. Now, some people might be listening to this saying, oh my gosh, who wouldn't have fun on a Sunday? Well, if you're passionate about your career, or if you're an entrepreneur, there's a lot of people that spend Saturdays and Sundays catching up, doing work, doing errands. And we're really not having that time to actually recharge. And what the research shows is when we take time to recharge, we're going to have more action, influence, and productivity. So I've actually seen studies where, once you start working more than 10 hours a day, the productivity just goes down and down and down and down. But it is a myth that just because you work long hours, you're going to get burned out. If you can work, say, a 9-hour day and you know how to turn it off. So when you come home, you're present to your partner, you go for a walk, you go exercise, you can keep yourself recharged forever. And I would say that's very much how I am. I might work a long day. I'm very passionate about what I do. But people would probably describe me, if I wasn't in the room, they would say, oh my gosh, where does that woman get her energy from? And it's really about, I take it so seriously. And that's the strategy too. If we have time, I'll talk about the strategy. It's called the Friday 5, where I have my clients every Friday, just take 5 minutes to assess your resiliency. Ask yourself 3 questions. What were my resiliency wins? So for example, you know what? I exercised 2 times. I got a great night's sleep. My nutrition has been excellent. And I got together with a friend who I haven't seen in 3 months. Then I say, what is my resiliency goal for next week? So it maybe it's that I want to sign up for that conference. Maybe it's that I want to take that training. Maybe it's I just need to work on my relationship with my boss. But then question number 3 is, what's my first step? So I have them just take 5 minutes. So no matter how busy you are in your career, I really feel like we need to recalibrate, and we need to reflect once a week what's going on. Because I've heard the stories of too many people that get let go or that are in these careers for 7, 10, 15 years. And they said, Beth, I've been miserable for the last 8 years.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking to me because the world needs you and needs you with your brand. And that's part of resiliency, is figuring out what are your attributes that you have to share with this world.
So we'll come on to brand next and we'll wrap up with that, Beth. But okay. You mentioned something here, and I assume there's a straightforward answer to this, but I don't know. And I assume that not to put you on the spot, but I assume there's a ton of data on this. But you mentioned nutrition. Are there any high performers? And coming at this from the context of a sales professional like me, I was driving around in my dull grey BMW to all the hospitals here in Yorkshire. I was drinking terrible hospital coffee day in, day out. Just out of politeness when a member of the nursing team or a surgeon would make it for me. But it was difficult to have anything really healthy for lunch. Sure, you could make some kind of salad and that would perhaps keep for kind of 3-4 hours, but you were, again, it's more and more difficult. It's not like you're just in an office and you can, for me now, I'm at home, I've got a Vitamix blender next door, I can make green smoothies, I can do all this kind of cool stuff. But how important is your daily nutrition? And are there any high performing individuals in the world of business who are eating McDonald's every day, or does that not exist?
Nutrition is huge. And I think it's like everything else too. It's that whole piece of moderation, that it's not like saying, I'm not going to tell everyone, you need to be having everything organic. We throughout the day, we want to be aware of, again, it's our energy. So the individuals that are eating McDonald's, we know, we don't even need to talk about what's going to happen. That first hour, you might be okay. That second hour, you might crash. So it's the same with the coffee, We know that 2 or 3 cups are okay. It's not like we have to eliminate coffee completely. But I've had clients I start coaching, they said, Beth, I drink 4 or 5 cups of coffee. Then by 2, 3 o'clock, I have my next 2 cups. Oh my gosh, what is that doing to your system?
Yeah.
So nutrition is huge. And again, some people aren't as fortunate to have, to be able to make a smoothie in 2 hours. But I recommend to my clients, pack your snacks. Bring the little nut bags, bring the little yogurts. And for individuals that are traveling, now they make things so much more accessible. I just had a client email me. She found little hummus and carrots. So she's like, Beth, you'll be so proud of me when I get my little, So there's little, again, it's knowing, it's preparing. So I think that's like a theme. If you think about success, is taking a step back and saying, okay, what do I need to do to make today the most productive day for me? So I've learned, I'm usually in Boston 2 or 3 days a week. I pack my little snack bag, and then I'm fortunate. There's cool salad places. I'm very, very fortunate. But if you don't have that option, well, what's that good, simple thing you can pack up to bring with you? Because it's all it's all connected. And that's why my resiliency model is different than many others, because well-being to me is the first thing we have to take care of. Then we can talk about really being productive in our career. Because if we're not taking care of ourselves, what's going to happen? We're going to fall apart.
Sure. So if you had your resiliency model and you might already do this, but in a pyramid shape, what would be the order of the different layers with regards to the biggest bang for buck, or the must-haves versus kind of what kind of levels things up or multiplies things later on?
Okay. So, and it's interesting because I've had people ask me this question, and I always say, I wish I could do it. I wish it could be simply a pyramid, but it's more like a circle because they're all interconnected. So it begins with well-being, because we have to, it's like the thing about on the airplane, putting your oxygen mask on first. We have to really take care of ourselves first so that we can have the best impact in our career. Then it's the self-awareness. So it's knowing our personality, knowing our stressors. Then it's the brand, because we need to know what are our strengths, what are our attributes, how can we add impact. Then it's the connection, because isolation is the dream killer. So if you really want to I have seen so many professionals ruin their career because all they do is sit in front of their laptop. So you need to connect with others, and you need to make it a habit. So even for my introverts, I give them homework assignments. Once a month, you need to find someone in your organization to have lunch with. And they keep saying, Beth, it's so much fun. I wish I would have done that 10 years ago. And then the final one is that innovation, because it's great to be innovative. But I like to say this to my leaders, if you're a stressed out leader with all these innovative ideas, I'm not interested in being with you. So that's where the well-being and the self-awareness comes, because no one, I think we've all had examples of working with managers or individuals that are arrogant or stressed out or poor leaders. It just doesn't work. So innovation is great, but work on these other things and then be innovative. But it all interconnects.
So with regards, and we'll wrap up with this, Beth, with regards to personal brand, are we talking about having a flashy website of willbarron.com and having some cheesy video of me stood there with a green screen and some pointers on the board behind me? Or is there more to having a personal brand with regards to becoming resilient?
Okay, so this is great. So the 2 words that I'm going to say that are most important is authentic and genuine. So I think that when we think about personal branding, it's so important I love the example that you just shared. The more I feel, the more we're flashy and the more we're phony, that just does not resonate with customers, doesn't resonate with clients. And I think that, and this comes up a lot. I actually did a branding webinar 2 days ago, and someone said, but Beth, what if I'm realizing it's not coming across the way I want it to be? Well, that's great room for opportunity. If you want to be more strategic, or if you want to learn to connect better with people, that again would be that Friday 5 that I talked about. You make that your number one goal. And that's where learning about personality type might be really important for you. So I like to use the word authentic and genuine. And when I'm actually a certified personal brand analyst with a company, Reach. And when I learned about this many years ago, I felt like, why would my clients want this? So what clients have shared with me was, many of them have, believe it or not, PhD degrees or MD degrees, or they have just been in their super successful in their career, like a sales position for 20 years. And they never thought about this very powerful question. What is the legacy I want to leave? So what's the impression? What's the reputation when you're not in that conference room? What do you want people to be saying about yourself? And I think that's just so powerful for all of us. At the end of every day, what is the legacy we're leaving? What's the impact?
Amazing stuff. Well, with that, we'll wrap things up because I feel like, I've circled 3 more things to go through here, so we'll perhaps go through them on another occasion, Beth. But there's a ton of content to go out here already, so we'll wrap things up. And with that, I've got one final question to ask everyone that comes on the show. I know you're not an out-and-out quote-unquote sales professional, but you'll definitely have some insights on this. And that is, if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give her to help her become better at selling?
The one piece that I would share if I went back is something that I do, again, in my Friday 5 every Friday, is I open up a spreadsheet and I just bullet what my achievements were from that week. And it's so powerful. For example, with just writing my book, it's so exciting when I look back at last year, like going to the publisher, this piece, it's something that I wish I would have done that 15, 20 years ago. And it takes less than 5 minutes, tracking your wins every week.
Amazing stuff. Well, with that, tell us where we can find the book and tell us a little bit more about the book and where we can find out more about you, Beth.
Okay, so you can find Career Recharge, 5 Strategies to Boost Resilience and Beat Burnout on Amazon. It's also available in the Kindle version. And check out my website is www.bethkennedy.com. And if you like some of the tips you've heard today, I offer a free monthly e-zine. You can sign up on my website. I'm also have a Facebook business page, Benari Training and Development. And I'm also on Twitter, Coach B Kennedy. And I think that about covers all my social media. Oh, and LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, oh my goodness. So LinkedIn is my number one kind of connection tool. So I share lots of great Spark success tips. And I also share different success stories. And many of this wonderful podcast will be on my LinkedIn at some point.
Good stuff. Well, I'll link to all that in the show notes of this episode over at salesman.org. And with that, Beth, I want to thank you for your time, for your insights on all this. I really enjoyed having this conversation. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.